meningeal irritation, coma without any focal signs and without any meningeal irritation. So you know that if the child does not have any focal sign, does not have any meningismus, this coma is most of the time metabolic in origin. That means you have hypoxic insult, metabolic, post-infectious, immunization. So majority of these patients will not have any focal sign, nor will they have any meningeal irritation. If the child has coma, you know that you are dealing with a child with meningoencephalitis or subarachnoid hemorrhage. But if the child has altered sensorium or the coma with focal neurological signs like hemiparesis or facial palsy, you know that you're probably dealing with some kind of an encephalopathy with some kind of a structural problem, like tubercular meningitis is one of the important causes where you can have coma with focal signs. Every time I say focal sign, we are trying to say that it could be a right-sided facial palsy, it could be an hemiparesis, it could be third nerve, sixth nerve palsy. So any kind of a cranial nerve or a motor deficit is what is called as the focal sign. And we have also emphasized on the lecture that there are 6 points that you have to assess in all children with altered sensorium. One is level of consciousness. Second is what is the respiratory pattern. We also look for eye movement using the doll's eye movement. We also look for the pupillary size and reaction, and you know that pupillary sizes are going to give you a lot of answers, which is there. Look for brainstem functions, look for fundus, and look for herniation syndrome. And 3 or 4 herniation syndromes that I always emphasize that one should always try to remember is transtentorial herniation, and one which is very, very important is uncal herniation. So if there is a monoparesis of a contralateral rim, you're going to think of subfalcine herniation. If you have something like a third nerve palsy, then you know that it is hemiparesis, then you know that you are probably dealing with some kind of an uncal herniation, which is primarily there. So at least 2 or 3 important herniation signs should always be recognized. And we know that while managing these patients of coma, you have to ensure that all airway, breathing, and circulations are taken care of. Hypoglycemia is always corrected. If the child is having a seizure, you have to treat the child with lorazepam followed by phenytoin. Treat children with raised ICP, correct the dyselectrolytemia and acid imbalances also. Ensure that acute febrile encephalopathy is managed. Ensure that acute febrile encephalopathy is managed. Ensure that acute febrile encephalopathy is managed. Antimalarials often should be preserved for children who are having altered sensorium. It's mere positivity which is there. And if the child has diabetic ketoacidosis, you have to treat it accordingly. If the child has hypertension, you have to treat hypertensive encephalopathy. Ensure that you are treating toxidrome. So these are important points that I wanted to emphasize in the presentation. Okay, I think it is getting hanged. So the 3 or 4 points that give me 1 minute. So 3 or 4 points that everybody should try to remember is that any patient who presents to you with altered sensorium, you have to always think of these conditions. So let us start with the uh, process of polling, and let us try to learn together what are the important points which are there. So here you can see that what is the first question. I say that are you all able to see? Can one of you just to say that you're able to see the presentation? Can you type in the chat if you're able to see the presentation? Can you see my screen? Okay, thank you. So one of you has replied that you're able to see the screen. Thank you. So let us start with the polling. So this is the first question that I'm asking. A non-reactive pupil on the right side, and it is normal sized and normal shaped pupil on the left side in a comatose patient. What could be the site of the lesion? So here you can all see that this is the polling. I want all of you to please mark your responses. Till now, I have got only 52 responses. Please mark your response. Please mark your response before we proceed. Excellent. I can see the votes increasing. Please mark your response. All that you have to do is type the URL and vote it. Very good. Excellent. Now I can see that have come. Mark it. Very good. Excellent. Please mark it. Please mark it. Very good. Excellent. I need a quick one. Okay. So now you can see that majority of the participants have marked on the midbrain as the important response. So let us see that if a child is comatose patient, in a comatose patient, you know that the pupils are mid-dilated and non-reactive on the right side, and it is normal size and normal shape on the left side in a comatose patient. What could be the site of the lesion? So here you can see that the pupils are mid-dilated and non-reactive on one side. That means on the right side it is mid-dilated and it is normal size on the other side. In a comatose patient, always remember that whenever you tend to see an tend to see, you should always remember that it is a uncal herniation unless proven otherwise. So in any comatose patient or any comatose child, whenever the child presents to you with an altered sensorium and you see that one pupil is dilated and the other pupil is small, you should always think of otherwise. So you should know that in the uncal herniation, what exactly happens is that the uncal lobe will go and press on the midbrain. So when it goes and presses on the midbrain, the third nerve is going to get a palsy. So as a result of which, what will happen is that there will be a right-sided fish. There will be a right-sided pupil will be bit dilated and non-reactive, whereas the left-sided pupil will be totally normal. So this phenomena is also very commonly called as Carnohan notch phenomena. So you should try to understand that this is a very important phenomena which is called Carnohan notch phenomena. So this is an uncal herniation that you have to primarily think of. All right. So I can see that many people have already voted. So let's take this next case scenario. Hello. Okay. Can you all see the second question now? Can you all see the second question now? Please answer the second question. Very good. I've started getting the response. Can you all see the second question? I think you're not able to see. Give me 1 minute. Give me 1 minute. I think it is getting corrected. नेट बहुत स्लो है, नेट में प्रॉब्लम आ रही है. चल रहा है क्या? बहुत स्लो चल रहा है एक्चुअली. I think now you will be able to see the poll. Can you see the poll, please? I want you to now answer the. Okay, thank you. So can you attempt the second question? Very good. I am happy. Many people are able to now answer. Please answer, and you can see in my screen how people are answering. Excellent. I am very happy. Please answer. The child has no spontaneous eye opening. Some meaningful response when the mother speaks to him by nodding the head. He moans a little bit when he is spoken to. What is the sensorium of the child? So, excellent, excellent. So many of you have answered. Excellent. So many of you have been able to answer this question, and you all have answered it correctly in the form that it is minimally conscious state. So you are very, very clear in the concept that if the child has some amount of, even if the child does not have spontaneous eye opening, so there are two important things. One is wakefulness and another is awareness. That means if the child is having some meaningful response to when the mother speaks to him, wakefulness is definitely preserved in the child, but he moans when he speaks to. So that means he is probably not completely aware. So that means arousal is preserved completely, but awareness is suboptimal. So this is what is called as minimally conscious state. So you should always remember that in a child with minimally conscious state, the child will be primarily having preserved wakefulness and incomplete awareness which is there. That's excellent. So let us start with the next question. Can you see the next question now? Okay, now you can see the next question. This is a 10-year-old boy who presented to us with high-grade fever, severe pallor, bleeding from multiple sides, splenomegaly, bleeding from multiple sides. Excellent. Splenomegaly. So this child presented to me with fever, severe pallor, bleeding from multiple sides, splenomegaly, and altered sensorium. So which of the following is most likely diagnosis in this particular child? Very good, excellent. Please mark your response. Excellent. So I can see many people have now responded. So that's excellent. So that means this boy now presented to you with a high grade fever. The child was very severely pale and the child has bleeding manifestation from multiple sides and splenomegaly. So we need to very, very clearly remember that any child who presents to me with altered sensorium with presence of fever, I call this as a acute febrile encephalopathy. Whenever in an acute febrile encephalopathy, you have a severe pallor, that means it has to be some kind of a bleeding manifestation. It could be an intracranial bleed also, but in intracranial bleed also, you will not get splenomegaly. So that is very, very important. So that means if there is a severe pallor and there is a bleeding manifestation from multiple sides, so that means there is an ongoing intra within the body there is some kind of a bleeding along with splenomegaly in an Indian setup in presence of fever and splenomegaly and thrombocytopenia and severe anemia. We should always think of disseminated, always think of disseminated or for that matter malaria. Basically malaria, systemic malaria or severe malaria should always be thought of. So most of you have very nicely responded by saying that this is cerebral malaria. Now can it be viral meningoencephalitis? Please remember that yes, it can be viral meningoencephalitis, but again splenomegaly is little difficult to explain, but yes, some of the viral meningoencephalitis can have splenomegaly also. They can have bleeding manifestation, especially viral hemorrhagic meningoencephalitis can also have it. And severe pallor is usually very, very unlikely in children with viral meningoencephalitis. So keeping all these things in picture, I would probably think more in terms of cerebral malaria. Infectious mononucleosis can only explain splenomegaly. Most of the children with infectious mononucleosis do not present to you with altered sensorium. So please remember that most of them do not present to you with altered sensorium. So it is extremely important to understand that cerebral malaria should always be thought in any patient with febrile encephalopathy, which is there. Okay. Okay. Now, can you answer the fourth question? I will show you the video. I want all of you to see the video which is being played in my screen. So this is a boy who presented to us in emergency. Very good. So now this is a child who presented to him in emergency and this is the sensorium of the child. The child keeps mumbling, is थोड़ा सा हाथ और पाँव में खुजा रहा है, response कुछ नहीं दे रहा. So can you answer the question? Which of the following describes best the sensorium of this particular child? I can show you the video once again. He is mumbling something. पता नहीं क्या बोल रहा है, समझ नहीं आ रही बात. हाई ग्रेड फीवर था बच्चे को, मम्मी करके रो रहा है. He is biting his nail. He is not responding. So what is the probable sensorium of the child? Can you all answer in the poll? Very good. Very good. Excellent. I can see many people voting. Very good. So very good. So now you can see, now when I go back to the video and show you, you can very clearly see that the child is mumbling something within his mouth. Blah 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 blah. कुछ बोल रहा है. High grade fever चल रहा है. What do you think about the awareness? Wakefulness कैसा है? Wakeful तो है बच्चा. Awareness is probably suboptimal in this particular child, but he's mumbling continuously. It looks as if he's totally disoriented. All right. So you can call this as a delirious behavior rather than calling it as a minimally conscious state. But trust me, it is not wrong to call it as minimally conscious state because the child has preserved wakefulness and suboptimal awareness which is there. But presence of mumbling, presence of pulling at clothes, presence of something which the child is having with a high grade fever, one should always think of delirious behavior which is primarily there. So please always consider this as one of the possibility. So let us go to the next question. This 10-year-old child came to us in the emergency with altered sensorium for 3 days. His CT scan image is shown. Which of the following management strategy would be very useful in this particular child? I'll show you the image. हेलो हेलो, क्लास में हूँ, मुझे थोड़ी देर में आप फोन करो 11 बजे के बाद. So can you all see the image? This is a child who presented to us. This is a child who presented to us. This is a 10-year-old child who came to us with an altered sensorium. His CT scan is shown. It's actually an MRI, not a CT scan, sorry. Which of the following strategy would be unfavorable? What all will you give and what will you not give in this particular child? I want you to now answer. Very good. I can see a lot of people responding. Please respond. This is an image that I'm trying to show. This is an image of the child who presented to you in the emergency. He is brought with altered sensorium. Very good, excellent. Please respond. Excellent. I can see many people responding. Okay, now you can see that this image is basically an image which is showing multiple NCC. So you can very clearly make out that whenever the number of cysticercus lesions are multiple, if you give albendazole to this child, all the organism, all सारे कीड़े मर जाएंगे, so they will all show inflammatory reaction. So it is very, very dangerous to give albendazole in a patient with altered sensorium and multiple NCC. Never ever give a child with altered sensorium any albendazole. The only thing that you can give is dexamethasone, definitely, which will decrease the edema which is around the neurocysticercosis. Measures like mannitol and 3% NaCl, both these measures can always be given to decrease the raised intracranial pressure. So you should understand that the children who present to you with altered sensorium, multiple NCC, for God's sake, never give albendazole, because more and more inflammatory reaction will happen and more features of raised ICP will develop. So please never give albendazole to children with multiple NCC, especially if they have already come to you with altered sensorium. Is that point very clear? So let's move to the next video. Okay, so this is a child who presents to you, and I'm showing you some sign. I'm showing you some sign. I want all of you to analyze the sign and try to say what is the significance of this sign, which is shown in the video. What is the significance of this sign that is being shown in the video? Please mark your response. This is a sign that I'm showing you. What is the significance of this sign that you have to tell me? Please vote. Very good. I'm getting a lot of response. Very good. Excellent. I'm getting a lot of response. And I'm very happy to know that, see, majority of our students are able to mark it very correctly. So in this video, if you try to see this video, this very, very clearly shows what is called as Dawes-I response, or it is also always affected. So please remember that whenever a comatose patient has absent Dawes-I reflex, you start thinking that the coma is worsening. All right. So it is not possible that the child is in minimally conscious state, which is there. Rather, the child's, you have to think in lines of brainstem getting affected with this kind of a problem. Extensive bilateral cortical lesion will never result in Dawes-I reflex being absent, because Dawes-I reflex is a brainstem reflex and it is not a reflex that is generated at the level of cerebral cortex. Metabolic encephalopathy is totally out in a child who has presence of altered sensorium and Dawes-I reflex being absent. It does not mean metabolic encephalopathy. Please remember that presence of Dawes-I response being absent always indicates that you're probably dealing with a child with important thing. Okay, so can you the child which is shown in this video? I'm coming to the next question. So you need to describe the sensorium of the child that is being shown in this video. So I'm trying to stimulate the child. The child is slightly trying to localize. When I stimulate the hip, he's trying to localize. He has some amount of meaningful eye opening. So what is the sensorium of this child? I want all of you to respond. So here it is. Now I think most of you will be much clearer with this now. Okay, one of the questions that somebody has asked is, will you not give albendazole after DEXA? You should never give albendazole in multiple NCC. A single NCC or only fewer than 5 NCC, then only you will give, this thing. Otherwise, never give albendazole to any child with NCC. Okay. So can you all respond? Yes, I can see a lot of people have already responded and it is minimally conscious state. So you can now very clearly make out that if the child's sensorium has some amount of meaningful eye opening, the child is able to respond to this command a little bit, is able to localize, but is not perfectly being fine. So that means primarily you're dealing with a child with medium which is there. Okay, so let's move to this video and I want you to describe the respiratory pattern that is being shown in this video. So what is the pattern of the respiration that is being shown in the video? This is a child. What is the pattern of the respiration that you are thinking of? Very good. So please respond. Please respond. Very good. Please respond to the question. Of response. Excellent. So many of you have responded that this is a Cheyne-Stokes respiration. Please remember that whenever, now let us see that video once again. You have to see that video once again and try to understand that the child has very, very regular respiration and the child is hyperventilating instead of the child basically having pauses between the hyperventilation. So the child does not seem to have any pause in the child does not seem to have any pause in between the respiration which is there, but the child is hyperventilating continuously. So this is very, very typical of a neurogenic hyperventilation. In children with Cheyne-Stokes respiration, you will have periods of apnea followed by hyperapnea. So here the child is continuously having hyperventilation. Ataxic breathing is almost like a gasping kind of a breathing. Biot's breathing is again also does not have this kind of a regular hyperventilation. So this child basically has neurogenic hyperventilation. So you should try to understand that if there is a neurogenic hyperventilation, that means if there is a neurogenic hyperventilation, definitely above the level of the red nucleus or the midbrain. So it is very important to understand this kind of a process. So let us answer this question. I'll show you the image. Okay, so this is a 1.5-year-old child who presented to us. 1.5-year-old boy who presented to her for 15 days, altered sensorium for 15 days, and altered sensorium and decerebrate posturing for last 3 days. His CT scan film is shown. What is the most likely diagnosis in this child? Please mark your response. Very good. I want all of you to mark your response. Don't get biased by the polling that is coming. Please mark your response. Very good. So this is like almost like an important question. That means 1.5-year-old child who present. जहाँ पे भी बच्चे को febrile encephalopathy, features of raised ICP आएगा, always think that this CT scan very, very clearly shows that the temporal horns are dilated, the third ventricle is dilated, and the fourth ventricle is also dilated. So this is a communicating kind of an hydrocephalus, and you can see lot of basal exudates which are there. So this is a very, very classical image of tubercular meningitis. So this is a very classical tubercular meningitis, which is primarily present to you with this kind of a problem. Okay, so this is last one or two question. 5-year-old child who presented with febrile encephalopathy, what should not be the first line of management? Third generation cephalosporin, vancomycin, acyclovir, and mannitol. Very good. Very good. Okay, now, yes, yes, please respond. So here you can very clearly see that many people have responded on either mannitol or acyclovir. Please remember, any child who presents to me with febrile encephalopathy, where you're thinking of in meningoencephalitis, combination of third generation cephalosporin, vancomycin, and acyclovir is always started in all children with acute febrile encephalopathy. Mannitol should be given only when you have features of raised ICP. But another important rule which we need to understand, that any child with acute febrile encephalopathy should be presumed to have raised ICP unless proven otherwise. So often at times you can also say that mannitol is also a kind of wrong answer, and you can say that none of the above should have been the best answer. But yes, in such children, we usually tend to prefer not giving mannitol. Okay, so the last question, incorrect statement in managing a child with acute febrile encephalopathy. Should lumbar puncture be performed as soon as possible? Is MRI preferred over the CT scan? Is raised ICP should be presumed in all children with, and doxycycline azithromycin can be added? Very good. Please respond. These are very, very important concepts that you need to understand. Excellent. So many people have responded already, and you can very clearly see that majority of the people are able to understand that lumbar puncture should not be performed immediately. Please ensure that if there are features of raised ICP, please get a neuroimaging done before you do a lumbar puncture in any particular child. Should never be in a hurry to do lumbar puncture in any particular child. So this is the last question. Identify the wrong match. Decerebrate posturing, decorticate posturing, reactive pupil. You can start marking your attendance, please. Please mark your attendance. Very good. So many people have responded beautifully. We need to remember very important points, that जहाँ पे भी red nucleus आता है ना, red nucleus will always give you what is called rubrospinal fibers. Remember that these rubrospinal fibers will cause flexion of the upper limb and extension of the lower limb. If these rubrospinal fibers get cut, that means if it is below the level of the midbrain, it will always result in decerebrate kind of a posturing. Any lesion which is above the level of the midbrain will always result in decorticate kind of a posturing. Remember that whenever the patient is in coma and the pupils are reactive, you always consider this to be a metabolic coma. And metaxic breathing is a very, very classical feature of medullary lesions which are there. So hope all of you enjoyed learning this thing. So please mark your attendance. Please mark your attendance. Thank you very much. Please mark your attendance and leave the room.